Welcome back to Summer Camp 2024 by No Revisions. This summer, we're talking to our service providers about trends and what it takes to be successful in their respective crafts. Today, we have Laura Sherb, who is the owner of Page and Play, a food and beverage photography studio, and she also offers our brand photography service here at No Revisions. So, Laura, thanks for joining today.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me, Anna.
Of course. It's been so fun to work with you. I don't know how long it's been, but we've worked on several projects together for a few of our clients. So I'm excited to dive in more about like your process and how you make everything happen and even talk about some trends we're seeing in the space.
Absolutely. Well, the feeling is very mutual. It's a great team that you have, and I'm excited to chat more and dive deep.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I guess the first thing I wanted to start with was just giving people a little bit of an overview of what a brand shoot looks like. I know that some of our clients are either solo entrepreneurs or starting a business for the first time, and making a photo shoot happen can be pretty overwhelming and maybe even intimidating. So I'd love to kind of have you walk us through the typical process of, here's a brand that needs a photography project. What does that look like from the initial, they send you an email to the final delivery of the photos?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I mean, I think the beauty of hiring people like you and people like me is that we have the experience to support those solo entrepreneurs, so those people who are maybe launching a product for their first time in the things that have to happen before you even pick up a camera. And you and I know that that's a really important stage for the project. So when I onboard new clients, I do a lot of discovery work with them. And what this means is I just take a couple weeks and I dig really deep into their branding, from everything from the colors that they're using in their packaging and their social and their website, all the way to who they're trying to target with these photos. We talk about where the photos are going to go, get all the nitty gritty details in terms of crops and angles and that kind of thing. And then we set up a shot list together. I love walking through a shot list with clients to make sure they understand what's going to go into each and every photo that I deliver to them. And then from there, I work on sourcing props, backdrops, food, whatever other fun stuff we're going to fold into the photography. And then comes the time when I actually pick up my camera. Once the shoot is over, I do custom post production to make sure that it fits in with all the other branding that these clients have. And then I turn over the photos to them to take it and run with it. And I always say that the project doesn't end until, we get to give shout outs to the clients that we work with on our social and our website, because it's so fun to be able to support clients. Even after we've delivered our deliverables to them and be able to shout to the rooftops all the cool stuff they're doing.
Yeah, I love that. So one question that always comes up is like, I guess how collaborative the process is. And you kind of mentioned that you would work on a shot list together and kind of understand their vision and everything. But some brands, I think like they have no idea what they want. So is that something you're able to kind of take on and present to the client?
I absolutely can. Yeah, I always tell people it's very dependent on how much they want to be involved. So if they have a creative director who wants to really take control of the shot list and put that together, that's amazing. And I'm always willing to be there to collaborate and bounce ideas off of each other. But if hearing the phrase shot list is new and exciting and terrifying to them, I can take that and run with it given the experience that I've had.
That's awesome. And another question that we get so often is like what timelines look like. I mean, in the marketing world in general, it's always like, we needed this yesterday, or how soon can you get this? And I think with photography or anything very specific to the creative world, it's like, well, you can't really rush that process. And like, but I also kind of sometimes have to disagree with some creatives of like, oh, like I'm never going to put a timeline on this and it could take 2 years or it could take 2 months type of thing. So I do like giving people a timeline. And obviously, with no revisions, we're very clear on you get this within a certain amount of days or weeks. I believe the photography service with us is within 4 weeks, and that's from the date that you get the products shipped to you. But typically, I mean, you are amazing. You work somewhat quickly, and we typically see stuff in a 2 week turnaround. But just to give people perspective on, I guess, your work outside of no revisions or photography in general, like kind of talk about what goes into making those timelines happen. Because I know too, like if we're working with models and stuff, we're working around their schedules and making a lot
Sure.
of things happen. So can you kind of talk about like what timelines look like and what goes into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to give the infuriating creative answer and say it depends on so many things, right? First of all, of course, I always say the first question is how fast can you get me a product, right? So if you can ship me a product, then I can have it at my doorstep tomorrow. That's going to speed things along for sure. If you are still working in the phase of, designing your packaging, testing the product itself, we're talking about a much longer timeline here. So, first step, get me the product. Second step is, like you mentioned, are we working with models? Are we renting out a studio space? Or am I shooting remotely from my home studio? The timeline's going to be a lot faster and a lot more flexible if I'm shooting at home. But of course, that's not going to fit every single brief. I think 2 to 4 weeks feels about right for pretty much every project that I've taken on with you, I think. And pretty much across the board, I would say that's generally how I work with my clients. I will say the one big exception is if a brand is pre launch. That extends the timeline for sure, and it just allows us to spend a little bit more time really building out the vision of not just the photo shoot that we're working on together, but what photos are going to look like for them a year down the line, 2 years down the line, when they're getting a billboard in Times Square type of thing. And that's really nice to be able to spend that time when we have it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think one thing you mentioned earlier was about like doing custom post production. And I know that like sometimes there are things that happen during a shoot that we're not expecting to need that extra time at the end to do post production. But can you kind of talk about like what does that editing process look like? And something I just want to mention for people that I run into a lot, and I don't know if you've dealt with this, but we have so many clients that we need products sent to you, the photographer, and they just have their normal warehouse ship it out, and we get stuff with dents, like torn packaging, like all that, and like just to just to give that heads up to people, like maybe you go and pick out the products, make sure it's the best version of the packaging because if we get that, we would most likely request you send us new stuff. But I've had one client that continued to send us stuff that was all scratched up and like yes, we can work some magic in post, but it's not even worth it. I think at some extent. But yeah, can you kind of talk about like what even goes into post production and what type of things you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I shoot in a program called Capture One, which means that I can actually, as I'm shooting, I plug my camera into my computer and I can tweak things like, yellow blue balance. I can tweak things like how much clarity is in an image as I'm shooting, which is really great. So, in terms of like the look and feel of the treatment, that's all happening during the photo shoot. What has to happen after in terms of post production is, like you mentioned, the cleanup. And depending on the subject, depending on how dented the cans are, for example, that can be a really big job that takes, quite a few days of sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours and looking at Photoshop, or it can be really quick. If you don't have packaging yet, but you just wanted some beauty shots of some different cocktails sitting on a bar, for example, it's going to be much faster. The other thing that I've started to fold into my post production is a little bit of AI work. I'm someone who has definitely been using the Photoshop capabilities to just help improve my processes, be able to tweak different photos in ways that I wouldn't be able to in a post production environment. And that's been really fun as well. But I would say that that's a little more experimental right now, depending on the brand and the client.
That's awesome. I love all the AI tools. I'm on Chat GPT like all the time. Do you happen to have like an example of what you've tested out using the AI tools for a photo recently?
Yeah, I do, and I can definitely share this with you afterwards. I was playing around with a new lighting technique the other day, and I had just gone to Whole Foods and bought some cupcakes so that I could play around with them. And I got home, and the most beautiful cupcake with the most gorgeous sprinkles and the great depth and texture of the icing had gotten sort of smushed at the bottom. So as I'm shooting this cupcake, I'm like, the top is beautiful, and the bottom is crumpled and looks so unfortunate, and like it's already been eaten a little bit. So what I was able to do during my post production for that particular shoot was pull it into Photoshop, select the sort of crumpled, sad area, and use the generative fill feature in Photoshop to just like create a new, more whole, less crumpled bottom of the cupcake. And I'm happy to, like I said, share those images with you, but it was incredible. And I think that that was a great way. Photographers and creatives are sometimes a little scared of AI and, is it going to take my job? that was not going to take my job. That was just something that made my life a lot easier. I could have sat there with the clone tool and reconstructed it by hand, but these features are really allowing me to just streamline that process, which I think is great for clients and obviously for me too.
That's awesome. Yeah, that kind of goes into my next question about like how do you ensure that the final deliverables align with the brand's expectations? Because I think when brands work with so many different photographers, and a lot of these brands don't actually have a style guide put together to make sure like everything's going to be cohesive from all the different shoots that they do, like are you using tools like AI to make that happen, or are there certain questions you're asking clients to make sure you are on the same page?
Absolutely. I think that this goes back to the discovery process that we talked about, right? So, my goal is that by the time I pick up a camera, I have a pretty good vision of what the photo is going to look like, before I'm even on set. And it's my hope that through this process and through all of the educational work that, you and I do with our clients, that they have a pretty good idea as well. There's always a great, power of pulling things from Pinterest and saying, like, this is the lighting that we're going for, this is the propping that we're going for. But you know, just helping clients to meter their expectations, say, we're not going to copy this photo, but we're going to pull elements of, six different inspiration photos. We're going to pair it with this product, this feel, this target audience that you have. And hopefully they're not surprised by anything that they see in the final deliverables at that point.
Yeah, I think that's always our goal is like we want to deliver exactly what they're looking for, or not even that, but exceed their expectations. Is
Exactly.
definitely what I like to hear from people. Um,
Yeah.
so, talking about like brands that aren't familiar with this process, or maybe they've never done a shoot before, I definitely recommend having a photographer put together a style guide for you, or have that in your brand strategy. But let's say there's a new food and beverage brand launching. They don't know what they need. Like, do you have a list of core photography that they would need for their website or social media? Like, is that something you can suggest, or can you even talk about some examples of what that would look like?
Yeah, sure thing. This is definitely something that I would say, even if a brand thinks that they know what they need, I'm always curious to hear how you came up with that list, who was helping you make that list, and if you've really thought through all of these scenarios. I have worked with quite a few CPG brands in my day, all the way from, like I said, pre-launch to big brands that are on shelves at stores like Walmart and Target, and there are a wild variety of needs and scenarios in which you could apply these deliverables that we're giving you. So I always like to make sure, have you thought about, everyone knows that they're going to use the photos on social, right? That's kind of a given at this point. But have you thought about social to web and what that transition is going to look like for the photos? Usually that requires a different crop, it requires a different resolution, and it often requires some negative space so you can play with text. So that's number one, I always tell people. And then the second thing I always encourage people to think about is, as you approach retailers for your brand, what assets are they going to need from you in order to allow your brand to shine on their shelves and to be a good partner for them? Because you have to show up and be a good partner for them to make them want to stock your product. So, can you give them assets that they can use in their marketing to really show off your product? And can we give you some assets that you can put in a sell sheet before you're even on shelves to be able to convince them to stock your product? I think that those are the big ones for me that I'm always encouraging people to think about. And then two, if there are brands who are going to pursue funding at some, fundraising at some time, I always want them to be thinking about what are some assets that you could put in front of potential investors that would really show that you have a vision for where this is going and that your vision is worth investing in. And I think that that can be something that also flies under the radar, but when you need it and you need it to look really good. So definitely something to think about early on.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. And I think all the time about like within the CPG space, how much of this marketing is going to get used or posted for all the retailers, or you're in, because like brands like Target, they're still going to do their own shoots with your brand, but there's so many like mom and pop shops or the smaller people that like, hey, they want to use the assets you have. And if you're not producing good things or constantly talking about your brand on social media, why would the retailers help support you in that way? So I really love
Exactly.
that call out. And kind of one of my final questions to wrap up talking about the process, because I definitely want to talk about trends and things like that that you're seeing. So this is a common thing that I have to talk to people about, and I love that you kind of share all the ideas of like where all these photos are going to be used and things like that. But I think people are or at least a lot of the No Revisions clients, and this is why I built No Revisions, is to be affordable and approachable. But they're like, oh, I just need this one video with 3 models, and the video is 30 seconds. And I'm like, well, if we're paying for a model, you pay for models by usually a full day rate. If we're lucky, we can get a half day rate. So if we have them, we should use them to our best ability, and things like that. So I think and I'm sure you do the same thing, try to be as communicative and educational about those types of things of like, well, this is how the pricing works, and this, that, and the other. But do you have any tips on like how brands can help maximize their investment when they're, working with a studio like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I think ask, right? That's the most important thing for me. I think, there's always this stereotype of clients and agencies going back and forth about price versus budget versus cost of services. And the thing that I always want to tell my clients is that I'm on your side, right? I work with these smaller brands because it's what I love. It's what I'm passionate about. I know from our conversations that you feel the same. So, if you're working on a restricted budget, first of all, just like let us know what we're working with because we're scrappy, we're creative. We will do what we can to get you what you need with what you have. And also, just, if you're, like you said, if you're looking to use models, if you're looking to, give a grocery budget for me to buy some props and style stuff out. Let's talk about how we can double dip in as many of those, things that we're paying for to set up the shoot as possible. Let's talk about what a remote shoot looks like so we don't have to rent a studio, tether in, join me from wherever you are. That's way cheaper. And I think too, let's talk about before we even get to picking up a camera, here's one photo, but how can we use it in as many places as possible? Do you need me to export things with a different setting? Just let me know what you need. And I know that you feel the same. We'll do our best to get you what you need and make sure that you can use it anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I mean, having worked in the agency world and the marketing world for so long, so many small brands have been, I guess, wronged.
Mm,
Someone overcharged them or they found out later. There's all these things, but I think like I do try to, say I'm on your side. I want to make things work for you. And not just saying that to take people's money, but so many people are trying to take people's money. But for No Revisions, I think we do have a good team of people that really truly care. And I'm sure we all know that like small business is not where we're going to get rich off of, and if we're here and have been here for a while, there's a reason that we are passionate about it and enjoy it. So obviously with No Revisions too, like the whole premise of me starting this was to be able to work with smaller businesses and offer something affordable. And how we've done that is trying to cut down things that like you may not necessarily need to pay for. So a lot of our services don't already include like account management time. So if you want to be setting up calls and to review things in real time, then that we will charge you extra for that. Or we do work with smaller studios that are really passionate about this to offer a like introductory rate type of thing. So that's how we're able to kind of cut and save costs, but we definitely don't, cut on quality. But I'm curious, like from your perspective, because I know in the photography community and creatives in general, like people don't like when things are cheap because they're like, well, that dilutes the price of everybody's work. And I don't want to say they're a competitor of ours, but like a lot of our clients have used Suna. And I'm very curious, like how you perceive companies like that are charging per photo, and maybe nickeling and diming a little bit more than we would technically do. But yeah, how do you feel about like studios like that are just kind of cranking things out and charging per photo?
Yeah, this is a question I get a lot from clients, especially about Suna. And what I always tell them is, you are a small business, but so am I. So when we're having these conversations about budget and pricing and timeline, even like there needs to be give and take on both ends. So that's the expectation that we need to set here. But also, I think that for a certain need, Suna's great. Suna's cheap. Suna's quick and simple, and it requires almost nothing from you as a client. However, every photo that you get from Suna looks like it's a Suna photo. And that can be totally fine if you are in, the stage that you just need stuff to put up or you need your product cut out on a white background. Go and do that. And then come find me. Come find us at No Revisions when you are ready to invest even just a little bit more so that you can get the access to our years of experience in this space so that you can get access to my disaster of a storage unit that is my prop closet, all of the backdrops I've collected, all of my experience in styling everything from, vegan deli based deli slices to mocktails. You can get that depth of experience for not that much more. So when you're ready to invest the time, invest the energy, invest the money, and come find our experienced agency, that's when it's right for you. So use us and Suna together. I always say, like, don't just rely on Suna, because I do think that there's a depth there that you're right. Once you add a hand in the photo, all of a sudden you're getting charged a ton more. Once you add a prop to the photo, you're getting charged a ton more. And at the end of the day, if you're using it for that product on a solid colored backdrop, that's great. And there's a time and place for that. And I would never shame anyone for needing to do that to fit a certain budget. But when you're ready, we're here and waiting for you. And we'll be able to add our little extra something, something to what you're doing and hopefully give you some assets that you can take far and wide.
Yeah, I love those call outs. And I'm the same way. Like I've even told people about Suna. I'm like, hey, if you just need two photos and they're this, like this is gonna be the best route for you. And there's even a lot of conversations I have with too, because like somebody may not even know how to budget their photo shoot. They might be like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm starting a company, I have $10,000, like I don't know what to do with this. Or they even say that to me about like social media marketing, and I'm like, oh, if you need sales and stuff, then I'm not going to tell you to start with organic. I'm like, hey, let's throw some things up there, but like if you really need the sales to start coming in to do everything else, like let's look at influencers or let's look at paid. So I think utilizing people like us or a business mentor can help you kind of determine what are the goals for your business and where you should be spending that money, because it could be where you need to do the cheapest thing possible and get a minimal amount from Suna versus like, oh no, well if you're pitching like you mentioned earlier, to investors or to retailers, like, and you really need something to stand out because they see 10 other businesses just like yours every single day. We can definitely help with that. But I think, to your point about like, if they get something from Suna, you can tell it's a Suna photo. I think that's really important to note too. And it's the same with our work. Like any agency or freelancer you work with, you really need to dive into that portfolio. Like if you don't see things that you want your stuff to look like, don't think this person's going to make a miracle for you, because there's people that are like, oh no, like I don't have experience in this, or they don't show the experience, but I can do it. And we do the same thing with social media with my other agency. I'm like, no, we haven't worked with this, but I know social media and I can learn about the brand. I think that's a little bit different, but on the visual side, whether it's photography or branding, like you want to visually see that they can do stuff that you're already in line with. Otherwise, don't be surprised if you're disappointed. So same thing with Suna. Like look at what they're doing, and kind of understand like what their type of photography looks like. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
some
And what their rates look like too.
oh
I
100%,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I always, I'll give a quick shout out to here in Chicago. We have a great organization called The Hatchery, and
Mm.
it's an amazing incubator for small businesses, particularly in the food and beverage space. And I do a lot of work there, coaching people not to pay for things like Suna if you need photography. Here's a class, teach yourself how to do it real quick, and save your money for when you're ready to invest in something that's going to be worthwhile.
And I think that can go to your point about like utilizing AI as well. Like we all have
Mm-hmm.
access. I mean, most of us have access to these tools now, and the whole purpose is to make it easy. Even Canva has like AI
Mm-hmm.
tools built within and things you can try and do yourself. So there are plenty of tools at our discretion now, more than there ever was, to make things very very easy for us. So kind of going off that, like, do you have any places you go to stay inspired for your next shoot, or like where you're pulling inspiration from?
For me, travel is a huge way to sort of reset everything, honestly. One of my favorite things to do is go grocery shopping in cities where I don't live. I think that it is so cool and mind blowing to be able to walk through the shelves, even of a giant retailer, right? And see just regionally the different ways stores are laid out, the different things that are next to each other on the shelves, the different packaging, the different offerings, how things are, end capped. I can't say enough about how just like getting out of my comfort zone really helps open my eyes to things like that.
Yeah, I love that. I hate grocery shopping for myself on a regular basis, but going to the really cool places like Erewhon or Pop Up Grocer or used to be Foxtrot, now shut down. I love like going and finding cool new brands and really get inspired by their packaging. And then I even dive into their social media and look at what they're doing on Instagram. That's a lot of where I spend my time as well. So, speaking of Instagram, I think, you know, things have changed a lot in the photography space on Instagram. The algorithm, UGC is really important. Like, how has that changed your role? Have you noticed people wanting or needing different things since Instagram has changed a lot with the algorithm or with the need of UGC? Like, what does that look like and change for your business based on like social media, really?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that I get a lot from clients is, how much should we be focusing on your, high-end photography versus UGC versus influencers? And I always say, you are the expert in social media. I am just a photographer. So one, you need to find an expert to ask that question to, because it's going to differ based on what industry you're in, who your target audience
Yeah.
is. And I know that, I'm preaching to the choir here. You certainly understand that very well, and you understand how that shifts based on the demographic that you're trying to target, too. So I always say go find an expert and ask them what the split should be. And then let's have a conversation about the goals that you have for each bucket of content. I firmly believe, the video is fun, it's eye catching. I love scrolling through Reels and TikTok, but I firmly believe that there is and always will be a space still for high end, very well done professional photography to show off your product. And I think that the brands who are, really doing that well are folding very authentic, cool, on brand UGC content in with that super on brand, really high end product photography, and creating more than just a look. They're creating a universe by really delving into all those different buckets of content.
Yeah, and are there any brands that like come to mind when you're talking about that? Like brands that kind of stand out to you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I always love Fishwife. What they do
I love them.
is
Yeah.
so incredible. I love their product, so I'm a little biased, I have to say. I think that they do a great job of really staying abreast of trends and what is super, going around certain corners of the internet on certain days, but then they also have great UGC, and they have just beautiful photography that they've invested in. So I think that that is a brand where I look at them and I think, wow, they're nationwide at Whole Foods now, and that just happened so recently. Like they were already being talked about from coast to coast. So what an accomplishment! I think Becca's incredible too. Um, I mean, I love Ensemble too. I think they're, what a brand, what a product, what a voice, what a really, really strong, different visual identity. I love scrolling through their feed. It's something that I go to for like entertainment as well as inspiration. And then the last one that I'll say just off the top of my head is Cherry Bomb, which is an organization of women in food. It's also a magazine and a podcast. I think that they do a really good job and are a really great place for brands to look for inspiration in terms of it's a lot of curation, but I think that they also behind all of that curation is a very, very strong sense of who they are and who their audience is and what they need to feed that audience to stay engaged. And it is always incredible to me just how thoughtful they are in everything that they post, repost, and the way that, they're not creating a lot of that content. Obviously, they have a magazine, so they are creating some content, but they know where each, investment is going. And I think that that is really incredible, especially in the media space as a whole today.
Yeah, they're all three of those brands, I guess, are really good call outs. And I think to your point of Omsom, like their voice really stands out. And yes, their visuals are very bold and bright and fun, but like getting that voice from the founders, I think that's good for anybody to be looking at as kind of like inspiration for their Instagram and their marketing.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah. You really feel like you get to know the
yeah,
founders through, the visuals that they create. And I really admire that.
yeah, 100%. Well, that's all the questions I had for you today, Laura, but I definitely appreciate this. If you want to work with us and Laura on a photography project, if you search brand photography on the site, we have an offering there. We're actually going to be restructuring it based on some feedback we've gotten from people to hopefully make it a little bit more of a build your own package situation. So we are able to offer clients exactly what they want. But yeah, Laura, thank you so much for joining today.
Oh my gosh, anytime. As you know, we can, talk about this stuff for hours. So I hope that people come find us and we can talk about it with them and make some magic happen together.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks again.
Thanks.